So let's now talk about the difference between productivity and creating jobs. Well, as humans, we have this innate bias towards providing work for people. We just want everybody to have the opportunity to be working. And so if people lose their jobs, it upsets us, and we, of course, want to find a way to give them work. But in fact, it's not jobs per se that makes us wealthier. It's productivity. And so we should be focused on how can we be more productive rather than how many jobs we can create. The story is told of the guy that was taking Milton Friedman, the Nobel Prize winning economist, around, showed him a project where they were building a massive dam. And they stood on the side of the mountain. They looked down into the valley below, where thousands of workers were digging with shovels to help produce this dam. Well, Milton was a little perplexed by how many people were involved. And so he said to his guide, we have created some machines, great big giant earth moving machines, that could do all of this in about a week. Just a couple of people behind the wheel, and they could move all of this earth in about a week. Well, the guide smiled and said, "You don't understand. This project is not about building a dam. This project is about creating jobs." Well, Milton heard that, and he smiled and said, "Okay, I understand, but I have a question." And the question is, why shovels? Why didn't you give them spoons? What Milton was trying to say was, if the objective is jobs, we could create 1 million jobs instead of 10,000 jobs if we had each person using a spoon to dig the dam. And it therefore illustrates the idea of why productivity is more important. Why spoons? Why not toothpicks? I mean, at some point you have to say that doesn't make any sense. Better tools is going to be more productive. And it's that productivity that matters. Another way to consider this would be to consider the story of Castaway on an island alone and had to survive. Now he had some resources on the island. He had fish, coconuts, maybe some goats, and a few things, some palm fronds. And so he set out to survive. Let's suppose he could just spend an entire day trying to catch fish with his bare hands, only to discover that the best he could do was one fish. So by the end of the day, he's exhausted himself, and all he has is one meal. Well, this is very discouraging. So he could, on the other hand, decide to invest in some tools. And if he took some time to build a primitive net and maybe a fishing pole, he might discover that he's then able to catch 10 to 12 fish a day with the same amount of effort. And so, since he only needs 2 fish, he might discover that he has 8 additional hours to invest in other things. Maybe he builds a hut, maybe he finds ways to get the coconuts down from the trees without having to climb them, and maybe he finds a way to hunt and catch goats so that he can have cheese or have meat to eat. But it's that productivity that matters. And we need to overcome our bias towards jobs so that we can move ahead with productivity. So let's talk for a moment about what we know and the rest of it, which we don't know. All we really know right now is that inflation is created when more money enters the economy for exchange. Now, we also know that there can be a short-run trade-off between inflation and unemployment. In other words, if we increase inflation a little bit, we can get unemployment to go down. In the short run, there's a trade-off that way. And of course, if inflation goes down, then we will see unemployment go up. This is known as the Phillips curve, and we'll be discussing that later in the lessons that we talk about employment. So I want to help you to learn to think like an economist. Thinking like an economist is something that will change your life and your perspective on the world. And there are certain basic elements of the thought process behind how economists think. The first piece of that is positive versus normative reasoning. Now, positive is a way of reasoning using logic, but it more importantly is defined as reasoning that can be tested. So if I say to you, it's 200 degrees outside today, 200 degrees Fahrenheit, you would say that's ridiculous. And I would say, well, that was a positive statement because it can be tested. We can all go out with our thermometers and check the outside temperature to see if it's 200 degrees. And when we find that it isn't, then we know that I was mistaken. On the other hand, what if I said, it's a beautiful day today? And you said, no, it's not. It's raining. Well, I like rain, and my ancestors lived in a very rainy place. So to me, a rainy day is beautiful and wonderful, but to somebody else it isn't. And that's a normative way of looking at things. In other words, you cannot prove or disprove whether or not it's a beautiful day to me. And in economics, we don't use normative arguments or normative reasoning because there's no way to prove or disprove it. The second piece of this economic reasoning or economic thinking is a term, ceteris paribus. And this is Latin, which translates directly to mean all things equal. So in other words, if we can hold everything else equal without any change, then we can look at one thing in the economy or one thing in a model and evaluate it. Ceteris paribus. The third thing is the role of models. So in economics, we work in three languages. The first language is words. The second language is graphs. And the third language is math. And we can say the same thing in each one of those languages. But we like to use the most appropriate of the three to communicate our ideas to other people. Now, the next thing I want to mention is that there are many times when economists disagree. We would say, well, how can they disagree if we're all using positive reasoning and we're all smart and intelligent people? And the answer is because, number one, we don't have enough data in some areas to be able to prove if something is one way or another. So while it may be a positive statement or a positive form of reasoning, if we can't prove it because we don't have enough data, then there can be arguments on either side. And the second reason why economists disagree is because economists come in all flavors. We have economists that are progressives and economists that are conservatives. We have economists that are old, and we have economists that are young. And we have a variety of different ideological views, atheist or religious, whatever, behind people's reasonings. And because we don't have enough data, it allows for economists to disagree.